Hi, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Lean Into Your Superpower. We are Kathleen and Zaina, aka the Lion and the Ram. We've built an entire podcast on harnessing and utilizing your superpower.
And our wish is for this to be a safe place where we can talk about why knowing your superpower is vital to your success, whether that's personal, professional, or financial.
Right. So the last podcast we discussed fueling your superpower, right? Leaning into discomfort. We talked about how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. What does that really mean in our day to day?
Right.
Today, it's going to be all about falling in love with your superpower. Why other people's opinions are none of your business, right? And how we go about falling in love with our authentic self. So we recently celebrated Valentine's Day, and this is kind of apropos on love. Valentine's Day is all about loving others, but I believe that even more importantly than loving other people is loving yourself, is the love of self. If you can't love your own self, how can you, show love to others? So that's what our topic about is today. We are super excited to be here with you all, our warriors. All right, let's do a check-in. How are you today, Kathleen? Does this topic bring anything in you? How are you feeling?
I'm good today. I have lots of thoughts on this topic about people's opinions of you and whether or not you should care. And it does bring up for me a time in my business where I had a toxic employee, and how that affected staff and kind of what that turned into during that period of time. And we'll get into more of the specifics in a little bit, but that's kind of what it brings up for me.
Yeah.
How about you?
For me, it brings up self-care. It brings up having, clear boundaries. All topics we can dive, flesh out maybe in later episodes.
Yeah.
But I think it brings up more than anything is just kind of being the exception and not the rule.
Hmm.
Sometimes our gifts are not supported or nurtured by the people around us. And, we have to remember that if you want to be exceptional, you are going to be different and do things different from everyone else. That's literally what makes you exceptional. And superpower, all
Right.
that is about being exceptional, finding your own authentic self, your own authentic
Yeah.
superpower.
Yeah. I think, and for those people that aren't supportive, I kind of want to throw out there sometimes it's not always because they are trying to not be supportive. I think it's because sometimes they don't understand what you're doing, and because you are exceptional, it goes against the grain. So just love those people where they are and understand that that's where they are, and that their path and their understanding isn't necessarily your path and your understanding, and they don't necessarily have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. It's just
Right.
kind of put that out there.
I think that's a good point. It's not about us trying to get people to understand it and,
Right.
have to like sway them to our way of thinking so that they can support us. We
Right.
can just be like, okay, I get it. You don't believe in this or whatever, but I'm going to do it anyway because this
Right.
is my power, my calling, my whatever,
Right.
what I need to do to leave my mark on the world.
Mhm.
I think in our society, it's easier to conform to the notion of what the rest of the world is doing than to go our own way.
Yes, it's easier.
And I think this is something that not a lot of people talk about or maybe don't even realize is that even when you fit in, you have internal conflict.
Yes. Yes. Because inside you know that you are supposed to be doing something that you're not doing,
Yes.
and it will plague you.
Yes.
It will bother you until you do this thing. So
Yes.
you may as well start.
Right. I mean, I've lived with that so long, my wanting to appease my parents, have them be proud of me, doing everything they want to do. But I was eaten like it was almost eating me away from the inside
Right.
out because
Yeah.
I was not being 100% me.
Right. That brings up for me, I used to do opera, and when I started thinking about doing something else because I felt like this wasn't my path, I got a lot of pushback from my peers because it was, oh, you've spent so much time on this and you dedicated so much, time and effort to this, and it's been so much part of your life for so long. And I got a lot of pushback, but inside I was thinking, but this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like this is what I should be doing. And I actually delayed moving out of opera for several years because people were telling me, well, no, you should be doing this. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I should be doing this. And I didn't listen to that voice, and it just delayed, moving on to something else. But and so the majority of the people were telling me, no, you should not do this thing. You should not leave opera, even though I knew that that's really what I should be doing.
Because you're so good and this is where you want to be, and it kind of feeds your ego as
you've got such a talent for it and all this sort of stuff. And that may very well be, or maybe I was horrible and that's why I didn't get that far. But I mean, whatever it is, something kept me from going, full force down that path. Yep. And it was because it wasn't my path.
Right. So I think we got to decide, either you fit in and have this internal conflict where it's eating you up, or you are exceptional, or you loving your superpower, whatever, and you have external conflict because everyone now sees you as different. Your peer circle, your group circle sees you as different, and we got to pick one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that whole thing of like, pick your hard, right? Those things you see on social media, it's hard to be overweight, but it's also hard to work out. It's, all that sort of stuff. So you are going to have conflict in life. And so I would rather have conflict doing what I know I'm supposed to be doing, where I feel fulfilled, where you have a passion, than have conflict internally and doing something I hate day in, day out, So yeah, pick your hard.
Yeah, you gotta pick. Yeah, I mean, what what's the alternative, right? Are you willing to sacrifice your authentic self and have it eat you up from the inside out to appease people? And maybe you are. I don't know, but I'm. If you're listening to the podcast, probably not, I would presume. Or are you be like, well, hey, this is, I'm listening to this, something's speaking to me about, I need to do something that's been eating at me despite or regardless. And yes, I'm going to have to deal with the external conflict. Right. Here's something that happens a lot is I think we need to change the narrative about when your friends or your family or anybody comes to you and says that, and says, oh, you've changed. I think we need to understand that they're saying that because they don't know how to say you've grown.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And your growth may be making their non-growth. I have another word in my mind, but it's not positive, so I won't say it. Their non-growth. It makes them uncomfortable because they see you growing into someone else, and you may be developing new skills and maybe advancing, and it makes them realize that they're not. Right. And sometimes that makes our family uncomfortable, or our lifelong friends uncomfortable, and I don't think that. So when someone comes to you and says, you've changed, there's automatically that negative connotation to it. It's I've changed. Oh, that's such a bad thing. That's not good. But it should be a good thing to change. We should change over time. We should grow over time. I should not be the same person at 40 that I am at 20. So if my friends don't come to me and say, oh, you've changed over the last 20 years, I think that should be a red flag. But yeah, I think we need to change our mindset about the word change. But you're right. It does mean grow. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can trigger in them, a thought in them is like, well, why am I not different?
Right. And hopefully they will see your growth or your change as propelling them to get better. And sometimes not. Sometimes they want to keep you the same person as 20 because that's who they know. And that's a whole other podcast about how to let those kind of people go. Yeah. Get out of your life so you can continue to be the best version of yourself. Because having a lot of people like that around you will hinder your growth for sure. Right? Yes. What do they say? You're the makeup of the 5 people you hang around with.
Spend the most time with. Yeah.
Spend the most time with. So
That's true.
something that I read the other day that really I think is apropos to this and to talk about is you don't reap what they sow, meaning your peer group or
Right.
people around you or even your family, even the people who love you. You reap what you sow.
That's
So
true.
to me, that means like the path of being falling in love with your superpower, being an exceptional person, being authentic to who you are is a lonely path,
It can be. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think rather than fighting it and I think we need to see it as an indicator that you're on the right path. Because I do
Yeah.
believe that if most people are cheering for you and saying, "Yeah, that's what you're supposed to be doing," like they were with you in opera,
Yeah.
they want it, they want you become like everyone else, and that may not be
Right.
where you want to be or should be or need to be.
Right.
If that makes any
And
sense.
yeah, I mean, it makes me think, if they wanted me to stay in opera, even though I'm telling them I don't think this is the right path for me, it makes you kind of wonder, maybe I was fulfilling some sort of, me being an opera singer and being friends with them or being in their
Mhm.
circle served them something. It gave them something in their life. And if I was no longer an opera singer and I was just a regular attorney or a regular person who doesn't go on stage anymore and doesn't perform anymore, maybe they felt like that was a loss for them.
Yes, that's a very interesting way to look at it. I think that happens quite a lot with athletes, entertainment people, actors,
Yeah.
obviously musicians, that kind of thing is kind of the people that you bring along with you. They need to keep you at that level in order for them um, I don't know, to work, to feel good about
Yeah.
themselves.
Mhm.
All right. All right. Okay, so we have to understand that I believe everybody listening to this podcast today is exceptional,
Yes.
right? But how do I know that? Because each of us have our own superpower, or else we wouldn't, if we don't believe that, or we don't, we
Right.
would be listening to this. We have an authentic self, and we may have learned over time to stifle it because we
Right.
want to be accepted by most people or by other people.
Right.
And we got to understand in doing so, if we keep that stifled, then we're never going to accomplish what we want to do
Right.
because we're conforming.
Right. And sometimes that little voice gets drowned out by everybody else around you. And you need to sometimes spend some time alone and try to really think about, who am I and what do I want? Because everybody has an opinion. And in my experience, uh, people's opinions are fickle and their opinions about you are fickle. And so if you're going to base your thoughts or your authentic self on what someone else's opinion of you is, you are going to be tossed about with the wind, because that's how quickly people's opinions change.
Right. You got to give yourself permission to do things that are different from the people in your social circle or in your life
Yes.
or even age group.
Yes. You've got to let go of that. What am I supposed to do is what everybody else is doing. Well, if you do what everybody else is doing, then you won't be exceptional, because then that's what everybody else is doing.
Right. It's literally
Don't
like,
stand out.
right. It's literally like letting the opinions of other people deny you from your legacy, your history, your from a
Right.
life, that is meant for you. Right.
Right. When you think about people that have done exceptional and amazing things, they did things differently than everyone else around them.
Yep.
And
They are,
that's why they were exceptional. And that's why they, made a mark wherever it was that they made a mark,
right.
you know.
I don't know anybody who's exceptional. I can't think of a single person in the entire world that I've read or been a part of or been around
Yep.
where they haven't forged their own path.
Right. And if you look at what they did, I mean, and there's multiple people, and I'm thinking of right now. Henry Ford is one. Oprah is another one. But there's hundreds of people that have done these things. But when you think about these people that have changed the world or become elite in their field, it's because they knew what their gift was. They knew what their talent was, and they leaned into that. And that's what made them different from everyone else in their field.
Right.
And if our listeners would just do that, I think it could change so many things for them.
And I also think, in addition to that, something was in their brain that they could not shake.
Yes.
Right?
They were so driven.
Yeah, because it was just like, whatever, whether it's, Thomas Edison with the electricity or whatever, it's just, you just, no matter what anybody tells you, you can't do it. It's impossible. Steve Jobs with, the phone and the microchips. And I don't know if you've read his biography, but it was just like, he didn't know how to do it. And he was actually the one that had the technical knowledge to make this a reality, but he knew he just had to figure it out. Right. Couldn't shake it. You couldn't shake it.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. It's so funny because it's such this dichotomy for us, is that we don't want to step out of line, but we want to be exceptional. Mm-hmm. And like, it goes back to what you were saying about that whole thing about choose your hard. It's either going to be hard to stay in line with everyone, knowing that you're not fulfilling this passion or this skill or this superpower that you have. That's going to be hard, or you're going to step out of line with everybody and you're going to say, I'm going to follow my superpower and I'm not going to listen to everybody else. I'm going to listen to me.
Example where that has happened to you personally in your life, professional life?
I have had a couple of experiences with them.
You mentioned it a little earlier, and when we first started checking in, and I was just wondering if you felt like diving into it a little bit.
Yeah, let's dive into it, because this was a big learning experience for me. So I have a law firm and I've got employees, and I hired someone that turned out to be a toxic employee. And I had never dealt with a toxic employee before. So this was a learning on many levels for me. But tied into what we're talking about today, I discovered after the fact that she had gone to all of the employees and told them that I only cared about money, and they couldn't come and talk to me about any issues, even though I constantly tell my staff, if something's not working, I want to know, I want you to come talk to me about it. She told them that they couldn't do that, that I wouldn't listen to them. She was the only one who could talk to me. So she had created a divide between me and my staff, and then she would come to me and tell me, well, the staff they're afraid of you, they're intimidated by you. And I couldn't understand why that would be, because I always have my door open and I think I'm pretty accessible. So I was very puzzled by that. So lots of things happened, but let's cut to, she ends up leaving the firm. And when she leaves, that pulls her out. Now it's me versus the staff. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really understanding why that is. So we have a meeting to address that. And one of the staff members tells me that I don't treat people like human beings. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I will never forget that phrase. And I was shocked by that, because I truly do care about my staff. Like, I truly care about them, and I take pains to show them that I appreciate them. I thank them. We will give like gift cards for, exceptional work. We'll give bonuses. I mean, we try to really treat them well and show them that we appreciate their hard work. So that really shocked me. And it came from a staff member who had been very ill from COVID. She was actually hospitalized and on a ventilator for several months. I paid her for 6 weeks while she was out, which was all I could pay her at that time. And then I held her job for her until whenever she could come back. And then I kept in touch with her husband and I checked in on her. And during this whole time, by the way, I am going through chemo for my, because I had cancer. So I was going through that, and I went to visit her in rehab and all this. I held her job. So that I knew that was her interaction with me, and that was her, that was the relationship that we had. She would tell me she loved me, and she thought of me as a daughter. And then
this was the same, I don't mean to interrupt, but this was the same staff member who said that you don't treat people like human beings?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so I was shocked by that. And I started thinking back on our relationship, and because I thought, how we have had this interaction. So how could you tell me that I don't treat people like human beings when this has been our relationship? And it hurt me for a long time. And I struggled with it because it really made me doubt myself. And I started to think, do I really lack self-awareness to this level where I could treat people so badly and not even know, and I really struggled with it for a long time. And then I realized that her feedback to me was not based on our relationship. Her feedback to me was based on what this toxic employee had told her about me. Mm-hmm. And that the toxic employee's information to her about me was more convincing than her actual one-on-one relationship with me.
Right.
And I decided that this feedback was tainted and was not accurate. And I ultimately rejected it. Mm-hmm. Because I determined after a long time that no, I don't treat people that way. I do care about people. And so I ultimately rejected that. Right. But if I had allowed her to tell me who I am,
right,
it would have destroyed me, really.
Right.
Because it was so hurtful to think that I could actually be that kind of person.
Right.
And knowing who I am allowed me to reject that and not internalize it.
Right. How did you get to that point? I mean, I know I was with you when kind of that started happening.
Yeah.
Right? I think you came, like we started working together around that time. And look how far you've got. Had you let it stop you, right?
It would have taken me out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would have destroyed me for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did you?
It was a lot of self-reflection. And I had done a lot of self-reflection before that. So before that happened, I was very cognizant of how I treated my staff. I was very cognizant of our relationships and all of that sort of thing. So if I had just been running on autopilot, I don't know that I would have been able to reject that information, because I wouldn't have been intentional about the things that I had done. But I was intentional when I worked with my staff, and I did do a lot of self-reflection about what kind of manager am I? Do I, do I communicate effectively? And it's very important to me to be respectful always to people. So I would never degrade someone or, talk down to somebody, because that's not who I am. And that's not what I think. And so I don't think my staff is less than human. So why would I treat them as less than human? So
it's all about perception too, right? So we have to understand that other people's perception, and maybe even our perception, doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So that's why it's important to say to yourself, to recognize, hey, this is who I am, and I know this. Maybe I can learn from it, because I do know once that happened, you were more focused on making sure, you were, the whole thing about how to build your skills set up managing people. Maybe you didn't have as much attention on that before.
I definitely didn't, because at the time, like I said, I was going through chemo, so I was operating at like 50%. I mean, I really was just trying to get through. So I definitely wasn't as present during those couple of months that was happening as I needed to be in the office, but I just physically couldn't. And if you know anything about toxic employees, if something's happening, they take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And later, after she left, I had staff come to me and say, oh, she would do this and she would do that when you weren't here. And nobody bothered to tell me that these things were going on. So yeah, that's definitely played into how I manage my staff now, and, setting up systems and things like that. But so I learned, like I said, multi-level learning in that scenario. But I think if I hadn't done some work on myself before receiving that feedback, I do think I probably would have internalized it, and I do think it would have set me back, and would have really made me feel bad about myself, like that this is who I am,
right? Or this is not something you should be doing, like managing other people or having a firm, right?
Exactly.
Even though you knew in your heart that this is what you should be doing, like having other people not validated. In this case, it was your employee, right?
Right. Right.
You
And
could have
knowing what
just
kind of
quit.
environment
You could have just,
yeah, well, right. And knowing what kind of environment we create in the office and knowing, and because I've worked in other offices, and so I know that our office environment's a lot different. It's very supportive. You can make mistakes where, we created that environment. So then to have the feedback of, no, that's not correct. And, yeah, it definitely threw me. And I'm not going to say like day of, I was like, no, that's not right. I'm self-aware. I reject your feedback. No, I went home and I cried. And I mean, it was hard. I would keep it together at work and I would go home, and I wrestled with this for a while before, because I really did think, do I really lack that kind of self-awareness? Because I do work on that. And I do try to be self-aware because I'm not perfect and I do have things to work on. And that's when I ultimately thought, well, and with the help of my husband too, because I talked to him about it, and he was like, he's the one that kind of helped me see what our relationship was like. He was like, you visited her in the hospital, you went and saw her in rehab, you held her job for her, you did all of these things just to work with her, and you know that that's not true. You don't. And so that kind of pulled me out of it a little bit, out of the emotion, to be able to look at it analytically and say, do the facts match up? Because the emotion keeps you from seeing the reality of it, right? And so so he really helped me see that as well.
now
And
looking back at that time, I know it was
yeah.
years ago. Are you, when you reflect, how do you feel about that time now?
um it's interesting because it's not something, I mean, surviving a coup in your office is not something you ever expect to survive. And I'm grateful for the experience, which
Mm.
sounds weird, and it was very hard. So I don't want anyone to think that I this was a light thing. It was not. I had a lot of staff leave because of this whole thing. Um,
Well,
we,
basically, because I was there with you when it kind of
yeah,
happened, all your staff left, or most of it, while you were going through this very intensive chemotherapy
right.
process with a very aggressive form of cancer. And I
Yeah.
don't think people, yeah, it
Yeah.
was,
It was very hard. And what I learned, I mean, it's a very hard process, but if you don't learn from it, then it's a waste.
yes.
So all the pain is a waste. So I learned from a lot of things. I learned that I needed to change my hiring processes. I learned how to figure out who is a toxic employee, who's not. I learned that you can manage people to quit. So you don't necessarily have to fire people. You can manage people to quit, because once they know that, not that in an abusive way, but once they know that you're checking on them and you're checking their work and you're
Or
going
you're
to be,
holding them accountable.
that's
If
right.
they're not
Then
willing to be held accountable, then yes,
right.
the trash does let itself out.
Yeah, so they'll quit. So I learned a lot through that process. But the biggest thing that I had to learn from that was, I think, yeah, the biggest thing I had to learn from that was not caring what other people were going to say. Because what I was worried about was, my whole staff has left me. Everybody's going to think I'm a horrible boss, even though I really haven't done anything wrong. And they're all going to go out and say that I don't treat people like human beings and all this sort of stuff. And I was very worried about that. Has that happened? No. I still have a good reputation in the community. People respect me, and they respect the work that we do. So, but I had to let that go, because this toxic employee is going to go tell people what she's going to tell people.
Yeah.
I don't know what she's telling people. I have no idea. Whatever it is, I'm sure I wouldn't agree with her connotation of what happened, but I just can't care about that. And I just have to trust that the truth will bubble to the top. The truth will come through the lies. The truth will come out always. And I just have to rest in that.
Well, that's why other people's opinions is none of your business. Because, like
Right.
you said earlier on, everybody has them, and you can't allow and dictate your life and who you want to be in this world and how you want to move based on their opinions. Because then you are constantly kind of chasing a moving target, and
Right.
you will, at the end of your day, be like, woulda, coulda, shoulda,
Mhm.
right?
True.
Right.
Yes.
So, you are the most powerful when you are the most you. And really, the only opinion that matters is your opinion of yourself. And you knew during that process, what I heard from you, from what you were saying, is you knew that you were not what they said you were. Despite everything,
Right.
you were not what they said you were.
Mhm.
And if you know that at your core, nothing anybody says to you
Right.
will actually hurt you.
Right.
I have this saying with, the people I work with. And when I had my firm, um, it was a long time ago where there were like switchboards and like, so
Was
I'm
this
like,
the 1920s?
that wasn't that long ago. But everybody had like an office line, line one is whatever, line two. And so next to everything with my line always said HBIC.
Oh, okay.
I never it took me a minute, like my fax line, my copy line, everything, all my staff would put HBIC next to everything. And
Right.
finally I figured out what it stood for. And I'm not going to say it on here because this is supposed to be kid friendly, but it's head, be in charge, and look it up. And I could have taken it as, oh, how did they know I was this person? And, oh my God, they've outed me. But I didn't, because I knew in my gut and my soul that I wasn't a B. I just knew it. So it didn't matter to me. It's like, I say this example to people, it's like somebody calling me a bird. Someone's like, oh, you're the biggest, ugliest, whatever bird in the whole world, and I just hate like you being a bird or whatever. I'd be like, you just laugh and you just say to them, you're just crazy. Like you wouldn't lose any sleep over it, right? Because
Right.
if you don't resonate as a bird, they
Right.
can't get to you.
Right.
So that's why you are the most powerful when you are the most you, and when you know who you are, despite what everyone says, because then it becomes laughable. You only take it, you only get hurt by it in some way if you feel like there's some sort of validity, or you're not sure about who you are, or you get your sense of self from other people.
Right. Yep.
This is a huge point that we're making today.
Yes. Yes. You really have to know who you are. You can't be led by other people because they don't know you. They don't know you inside. There's a part of you that they don't know. And there's always going to be a part of you that somebody doesn't know. Like even your spouse. I've been married for over 20 years. There are parts of me, I'm sure, that my husband doesn't know. And there are parts of my husband that I'm sure I don't know either. Because there's no way you can know someone to that level.
Right.
So why are you trusting someone else's opinion of you who doesn't know every piece of you like you do?
Right. And the only real opinion that matters, and I keep saying this, is really the one of yourself. So if you think you're a B, then when somebody calls you a B, you're going to take it personal. If you don't think you're a B, when somebody calls you a B, you're going to think of it like they're calling you a bird or any other ridiculous thing. And I think that's also important to pass on to our children, or if we have kids, even if we don't have any children, if you're around kids, or you work with kids, or you have kids in your life,
Right.
it's important to, put that in them sooner than later, right?
It's interesting that you say that because I just realized we do that with our children. Because they'll, kids get all upset about something somebody said, well, they said this about me. And I'll go, well, is it true? No. Okay, well then why do you care?
Right.
If it's not true, then why? So what? They can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
And, so teaching your kids that, because when you're a kid, things that people say hold a lot of weight, and the sooner you can break them of that, I think gives them a lot of freedom.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how do you fall in love with your superpower? I call it a gift, right? You have to become obsessed with it. You have to get intimate with your gift. You have to know it from every angle. And your gift, whether you call it superpower or authentic self or the real you, it's all kind of the same thing, right? You got to know who you really are. You got to honor who you are, your gift, your power. You got to know it from every angle, right? The happiest people in life decided not to do what other people want them to do or believe what other people, say about them, whether it's good or bad.
Right.
Here's something else. Somebody could say you're the best thing since sliced bread. Don't allow that. It has really nothing to do with you, and it mostly has to do with them and what's going on in their life.
Right.
You see, it goes both ways.
Makes me think of two things. I know I'm the tangent person that's like, I thought of this. It makes me think of, there's those, a bottle of water is $2 at like the grocery store. And then if you go to the airport, that bottle of water is $4. And then if you're on the airplane, the bottle of water is like $6. So it's the same bottle of water, but its value is different based on where it is. And so when you're on an airplane, a bottle of water is real important. And so it has more value on the airplane than it does at the grocery store. So take yourself and your gift and go around those people that recognize your value.
Right.
And quit assuming that because somebody values at $2, that's really your value and you can't be valued at $6. Right. That's not the case.
Or even better yet, figure out what you yourself think of your own value, right?
Well, you will find those things, because I had a situation last week where in one instance, it was all in the same day, so it was weird. But it was it's the same dichotomy. In one afternoon, I was being told that I hadn't done everything I was supposed to do and all this sort of stuff. And then that evening I was at another event and I was being told what a great job I was doing and how lucky they were to have me and all this sort of stuff. And it's really two ends of the spectrum. And if I believed both of them innately,
right,
I would be so confused.
Right.
Am I good or am I not good?
Right.
I don't know.
I give this kind of analogy or story, Let's say you're sitting there at your house or at work or wherever you are, and somebody calls you, and unbeknownst to you, that person, just won the lottery. Okay, you're still you still are in the same positions, doing the same things. And, how do you think they're going to be on the phone? Oh, you're amazing. You're the best person I've ever met. I love you. And you're like, okay, great. But you're just, now imagine that same person just went bankrupt. Right. Nothing has changed in your life, but their reaction to you is going to be vastly different based on what's happening in their life. Right. And something that we got to realize from a mindset perspective, everyone thinks the world revolves around them because they're the center of their own world.
It's true. Yeah.
And we got to get out of that and realize that how people act literally has nothing to do with us and has everything to do with what's happening with them.
Right. Which is all the more reason why you need to internalize and self-reflect and figure out what your superpower is, what value you bring to the table. And go to those places where you can develop that superpower and use it to benefit other people.
Right. So here's the work, right? So how do you fall in love with your superpower? First, then we discussed this in episode 2, finding your superpower. You got to get some clarity on what you're naturally good at, what you're naturally attracted to. Mm-hmm. If you're still struggling with finding that superpower, whatever, go back, re-listen to that episode too, right? It'll kind of guide you through a little bit about how to go about that. Yeah. Then you got to channel those natural inclinations, right? So, okay, but how do I even become aware of them? Well, you can visualize one or more of these things that you're thinking about, through finding your superpower, you're like, I think I'm naturally inclined toward this, or this is really what I'm naturally attracted to. Then visualize them as things, as those things becoming a superpower for you, right? Lots of studies have shown how visualization of doing something literally tricks your brain into believing you're actually doing it, and it becomes more of a reality. We hear
Right.
this all the time. I mean, I don't know if you got this when you were doing opera, but before you get on stage, you visualize like how it's going to
Right.
be and how you're going to walk. And sports people do it quite a lot.
Yes.
Um, so, what is visualization for those that may not know? And I just looked up the dictionary definition of it, and it's literally the act of visualizing something or someone, or forming a picture of it in your mind.
Right.
It's almost like looking through a particular lens, your like unconscious, your imagination, your deepest desire, and seeing how your life unfolds within your
Right.
inner eye, within your inner self.
I would say I mean, you can do it in your mind for sure. And I think you should get as granular as you can when you're doing that. It's like smells and feel textiles and all that sort of stuff to create that reality that helps you achieve this thing you want to achieve. To me, it's similar also to one of those vision boards, because it puts it in front of you and you look at it and you're starting to visualize it and create it. So in a way, it's sort of like that.
Right. So if you're having a difficulty, actually seeing it, maybe starting with a vision, I think that's a very good point. So, and this is, I'm going to go into research here a little bit. I'm not going to get too deep into it like the last episode, but, there's tons of research that visualization acts directly on the brain. It actually alters your brainwave activity and biochemistry, and it literally affects, like every aspect of your life. There's lots of research that shows how mental practice, those visualizations, boosts confidence, enhances moods, helps the healing and processes, increases your effect on your performance, right? And even doing physical tasks. So I'll refer to some of the sources and articles and research, in the show notes. But that's important. Taking a moment and visualizing, what does your superpower look like if you spend time with it and doing it, and working to get it to a place of, excellence or exceptionalism. And it's also important to visualize what it might look like if you don't do it, if it's not channeled, and how does that feel?
I like that angle too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes we feel like we've done something when we've visualized it. We feel like, okay, well, now I've done something, but we haven't taken that next step to actually start it. But we've kind of relieved the tension on ourselves because we feel like we've done something, but we haven't done anything outward to actually begin the process. But now we don't feel as stressed because, okay, I did something. But I think it's good to look at it and think, okay, well, if I just visualize this for the next 20 years, where am I going to be?
Right.
Still visualizing it. Okay, so if I visualize it and then do one extra step, where could I be in 20 years?
Right. And I also, I was also referring to the fact, like, if you can visualize what would happen if you don't. What would happen if you don't pursue whatever it is, that inclination, that thing that you're, that's been in your brain that you just can't, that's just eating at you? What does your life look like without pursuing it? Probably the same as it looks like now, or worse. Like,
well, yeah. Well, that was my thought. Like, if you just visualize it and do nothing else and don't take any steps to it, you're basically not pursuing it. So yeah,
right.
you're
just getting older, and it's life is going to pass you by whether you do it or not.
Right. But and then back to the previous episode, you need to then take the step to be uncomfortable.
Right. The fourth thing is, you've discussed this, you can visualize it all day. Kathleen referred to this, you've got to take action. It takes courage to be your authentic self. It takes courage to love your superpower. It's easier to conform, be on the hamster wheel, do the same thing day in and day out. Do you have the courage to act outwardly on what you see inwardly, internally?
Right. Right.
And otherwise, what's the alternative? And I referred to this earlier. It's regret. It's woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah, isn't that what they say, that people who are on their deathbed or at the end of their life, what they regret are the chances they didn't take,
Right.
not the chances they did take. It's usually what they didn't do. And for some reason that scares me more than anything else, I feel like, because I would hate to get to that point and just think, man, I wonder what kind of life I could have had if I just tried,
Right.
I don't know why, but that
Take
bothers me.
it and it goes bad. Well, at least you can look back and say, oh, at least I tried.
Well, and the thing is if it goes bad, see, this is what I go back to. If it goes bad, that tells me that's not how you do it, and I can learn from it and change it. Maybe I could create this amazing life by failing a couple of times early on, So anyway,
and this kind of reminds me of, for those of us who have kids or have kids in our lives, that look up to us, is that how you want them to live?
Right.
You as their parent or mentor or coach or whatever you are, do we tell our children, don't dream? Don't,
That's scary.
stay small, make sure you do what other people want you to do and don't have a life of your own. Yet we go through our own life and let our dreams die.
We do. And how sad for us. How sad for us. Okay, but we're not going to do that, and our warriors are not going to do that. We are going to take action. We are going to create this amazing life with our superpowers. I know that our listeners will do that. We're doing it with this podcast and other things in our lives. So here's the deal, warriors. When you take action, because I know you will, the people around you are going to notice this, and they're going to form an opinion, because everybody has an opinion about everything, right? We all think we're smart enough to know everything. So when they form an opinion, they're going to give you some feedback, whether you want it or not. And I want you to do this analysis, because this is the analysis that I do, and it's really helped me. When you get this feedback, look at three things. Who is the speaker who's giving you this feedback? What is their motivation for the feedback? And does this comport with what you know about yourself? So first, the speaker, is this someone you respect? Should this be somebody that you respect? For me, it would be to have, if they're giving me business advice, are they giving me business advice? And they're someone that's built a business I respect and admire. If they're giving me family advice, is this someone who has a great relationship with their kids that I want to emulate, or a great relationship with their husband? Basically, what gives them the right or the authority to have an opinion? Then the motivation. Why are they telling me this? Are they telling me this to make me better? Or are they telling me this because there's an ulterior motive here? So look at why they're telling you this, and then analyze it and reflect on it and decide if this comports with what you know about yourself. And this goes back to the experience I had with the toxic employee, and about being self-aware and taking that feedback and really kind of rolling it around and living with it, and deciding whether or not this is a legitimate piece of feedback that you should take in, or whether you should reject it.
Right. Because we're not saying, hey, everybody's feedback is shit and you should never,
Right, exactly.
You can become like this narcissistic person, and
Right.
your opinion is the only opinion that matters. We're not saying that, but you gotta, know yourself at some level to be like, okay, holding yourself also accountable.
Right.
Is this something I should truly work on and change, or is this something that is just, just completely invalid to who I am as a person?
Right.
And the person is that's just their opinion and how they see it. And then it is a kind of a really difficult, balance to go through, but such an important one. And right. Okay. All right. So what can you do to take care of your superpower and advance it every day? And how do you, take the action? You do it a little bit each day. It's about consistency. It's not about, and this is again, research, it's been shown, it's not about throwing everything in and then quitting. Okay. It's about, you see these people where, like, whether it's a diet or whatever, I want to lose 100 pounds in the 1 month, and then they don't do it. it's a lot easier to just do a little bit every day. I have a saying, I know I heard it from somewhere and I can't remember who. This isn't me. Someone said this to me. I heard it, but it really resonated with me, where small hinges swing big doors.
Yes.
Right. So it's about the teeniest, tiniest baby step. And yes, you may feel like, oh, this is baby step is just so small and it's not going to give me any, it's not going to get me to where I want to be. But doing teeny, tiniest, smallest, digestible steps are going to swing those big doors for you, and good, because they're going to give you momentum, and they're not this huge audacious step where you're looking at it and don't even know how to start, so you just kind of maybe end up quitting before you start because it just seems so big. Let's break down the steps, right? In my line of work, we have outcome goals and we have process goals. So the outcome goal may be whatever it is. I want to make $1 million. But then you go, okay, what are the process to get that? Well, make, I don't know, 250 every quarter. Okay, well, what is what are you going to do every month? Whatever that's divided. Okay, how do you do that? What's the first step? And then literally you just keep breaking and breaking and breaking. And the first step is, I'm going to pick up the phone and call my friend and see if she's interested in this, right? Whatever. That's the thing, because that's more digestible and doable than if you're just looking at making $1 million in a year. It seems almost so out of reach.
I kind of see that as like backing into it. So you start with like your goal, and then you start backing down to each step further and further. Okay, well, what do I need to get to the million? I need to do 250,000 a quarter. What do I need to do I need to build this many hours in a law firm. I need to build this many hours. Then how am I going to do that? And you just kind of back into it until you have that first step.
Right.
Where you're like, okay.
It's so important to take the first step.
Right.
So we have a challenge for you guys. We're calling it Love Your Superpower Challenge. Okay. And we want you to post it. We want to be able to help you guys through it. And if you guys can't get to the baby step, this is literally what we do. We can help you figure what that is out. But, and we want you, if you haven't joined our Facebook page or Facebook group, do that, because that's where a lot of this kind of private communication is going to happen, is in our Facebook group.
Yes.
So Love Your Superpower Challenge. What is that? We want you to spend time with yourself, find a quiet place, and place 20 to 30 minutes where you can spend 20 to 30 minutes just visualizing, making notes, or talking to yourself, or doing a vision board, whatever, about what you love and what you are good at or what you're attracted to. Okay, that's step one. Then I want you to find some clarity about how you want to cultivate your superpower and where you want to go with it. What do you desire to achieve? What is it? What is the end goal here? Right? Because we don't just do things just to do things. There has to be some sort of fruit to our labor. Why are we putting in the work? What are we trying to achieve? So think about that. Then create a list of ideas about how you can begin activating your superpower in big ways and small ways. Yes. Don't be scared. Dump it all out. Then we break it down on what you can do each day, right? And you start with like a year or 5 years, and like Kathleen said, you work your way up backwards to the day or the week. What can you do over the course of the next month or day or week or whatever, or year? Make a list of books, programs, documentaries, people, places that will inspire you to activate it. Yes. And then make a decision every day to wake up and use your gift, or get some momentum on the baby step. And if you're having a hard time figuring out the baby steps, or if you just want to run it by us, or you just want to take this challenge and do it, and maybe Kathleen, I haven't talked to you, but maybe we'll give people a prize or something who do it to kind of motivate them. You can post it, and we'll definitely help you.
Yeah, definitely reach out if you're having trouble thinking of that first step. Reach out to me or Zaina on the Facebook group. You can send us a DM probably in the Facebook group, and we can kind of help you work through that. So absolutely love to do that.
You can also email us. I don't think we've ever said that, but we have an email account. It's called admin@leanintoyoursuperpower.com.
Yep.
So you can also do that if you want. All right, so I think that's it today. I will put the resources in the notes sections. We're going to start this challenge right after we air this episode.
I'm excited about it. So don't forget, warriors, to like and subscribe to the podcast. Don't forget about our YouTube channel where our raw and uncut footage is going to be. If you want to see our pretty faces, that's where it's going to be. And then you can also join our Facebook page and join our Facebook group so that we can post all about, loving your superpower and how you're doing the superpower challenge and, any steps that you're taking to, develop it. We'd love to hear it.
And I want your takeaway for today, warriors, is that it's better to walk alone than with a crowd going in the wrong direction.
That's right. So thank you guys. Till next time, warriors.
Bye-bye. Take care.